Hi everyone. So together with my group mate, good day everyone, and especially to you ma'am. So this day is we talk about the metacognitions and learner-centered psychological principles. But before that, we need to read the desired learning outcomes first. So the first um, outcomes that we discussed this morning is explain metacognitions and identify. The second is identify the different learner-centered psychological principles. And the third is explain the different learner-centered psychological principles. So the first topic that we discussed this morning is we talk about the metacognitions. I know your first impressions right now when you heard metacognitions, di ba? That is a very familiar. But instead of asking you what is or give me your own understanding about metacognitions, now I give you a that is a very common introducing our topic. So I have here the image. All you have to do is to observe unsa ang iyahang ginaingon sa image nga na. So I give you a 30 second to observe the image. So start the 30 seconds. Okay, so the 30 seconds is done. So as you can see in the image, I know we are different about interpretations of that, diba? But that is related to our topic this morning. That is a kind of metacognitions. Now, anyone, when we heard about metacognitions, do you have a idea what is about metacognition? Okay, since now, uh, when we say metacognitions, that is a refers to a person's awareness and understandings of their own thoughts processes. And the second one is the process of thinking about thinking. So the third one is used to make decisions that maximize learning outcomes and help students meet their goal. So balikan nato ang image. As you can see the image, um, consider a painting as a self-portrait. Now, let's imagine for a moment nga kanang painter daw is si Teacher Juanario daw na siya. Si Teacher Juanario daw ng painter. Now, para ma para maka-make siya og painting, unsay first niya nga buhaton? Syempre, he plan, di ba? He planned to use the space of the canvas. And as you can see, they use the different technique, di ba? And the second one is they monitor. They monitor their own progress to make sure that they or he staying on a track. And the third is he evaluate her work also, that constantly checking that image on the canvas is reflect the image on his mind. Now the question is, I repeat, what is metacognition? Thinking about thinking. Now the question is, nagets ba ninyo ang thoughts? Okay, since yes, now let's talk about the classroom settings applying in a metacognitions, di ba? Now since this subject is facilitating learner-centered teaching, let's talk about the classroom settings that applying in a metacognitions. Now, first one is ako ang naingon ganiha that we plan, di ba? You as a teacher, you need to planning, set the clear goals, encouraging and choose the appropriate strategy for your students, di ba? And the second one is monitoring. Help students to monitor their learning. And the third one is evaluations. Encourage students to reflect their own thinking. That is a three phases of metacognition in a classroom settings. Now, medyo libog ang metacognition, sir. Can you discuss in a easy way? Ng ani na siya. 'Di ba? After semester, naga-think ta, after semester makita nato ato ang grades. That is a kind of reflect. Thinking about thinking, planning, monitoring, evaluating, and the last one is reflect. Di ba? Based on your performance after the semester, makita nato atong grado. Nganong 2.75 ramang ko kang teacher Juan nga I try my best man unta tanan gibuhat nako. Napoy uban nga makarealize nga 2.75 ra lagi ko. Maybe 2.75 ra kay wala pod na meet ang standard ni Sir Juan. And now, so let us proceed to the second desired learning outcomes this day is identify the different learner-centered psychological principles. I know that some of us are familiar about this, but I would like to asking you nga you heard about the learner-centered psychological principles, diba? What are these, diba? So now, in a learner-centered psychological principles, it was introduced to us by the American psychological principles in the year 1990. Actually, the original learner-centered psychological principles are 12, but it was revised by the American psychological after 7 years, and it has now 14 learner-centered psychological principles. So these are the 14 learner-centered psychological principles. The natures of the learning process and goals of the learning process, constructions of knowledge, and strategic thinking, and thinking about thinking, context of learning, motivationals and emotional to learn, intrinsic motivation to learn, and effect of motivations all effect, and development influence on learning, social influence on learning also, individual difference in a learning and diversity, and the last one is standard and assessment. Now sir, why do you introduce us nga that is a learner? What is the importance of that, sir, for the learner-centered psychological? Understanding of the learners is one of the initial step to become an effective teacher, and that are 14 learner-centered psychological principles were categorized into four. So we have a cognitive and metacognitive factors that is composed by the 6 principles, and motivationals and affect factors that is composed by the 3 principles, development and social factors that is composed by the 2 principles, and individual different factors that is composed by the 3 principles. I know some of us are familiar of that words that I mentioned. So, but now is we focus the cognitive and metacognitive factors. Ma'am Beverly and Ma'am Farah will discuss that topic.
Alright, good day again everyone. So I'm going to continue the report about the learner-centered psychological principles, or LCP. So there are 14 principles. So of course here the students are the center of instruction. Of course, no, the learners are the center of instruction. So what I'm going to discuss is it is all about the cognitive and metacognitive factors. So there are 6 principles here in cognitive and metacognitive factors. So what are those 6 principles of cognitive and metacognitive factors? No? So first is nature of learning process. Next is goal of the learning process. Third is construction of knowledge. Fourth is strategic thinking. Next is number 5, thinking about thinking. The last is context of learning. So first, we are going to tackle about the nature of the learning process. Now, what is nature of the learning process. Okay, so when we say nature of the learning process, it talks about the learning of a complex subject matter is most effective when it is an intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. Meaning to say that learning is all about the acquisition of knowledge, skills, and understanding. It is a process where that not just done for students, but it is the integration or the integral to their personal development and the potential to transform their behavior and their cognitive processes. So, as a teacher, you're not just imparting knowledge to the students kanang dira lang sa school, but also you are developing their potential, no, and behavior, and of course their cognitive process. So, okay, so in addition, learning in schools emphasizes the use of intentional processes that students can use to construct meaning from information, experiences, and their own thoughts and beliefs. Of course, the students can learn through experience is the best teacher. 'Di ba? Ang students is mas maka-learn sila by learning by doing, by John Dewey, 'di ba? Mas maka-learn sila through doing. Ana dyan na ang mga bata. And of course, successful learners are active, goal-directed, and self-regulating, and assume personal responsibility for contributing to their own learning. Of course, the successful students, mga students na very active during the class discussion. Active agent rather than passive learners. Kasi ang passive learners, they are only take in information from the teacher. Unlike the active agent, there are interaction happen between the teacher and the students to students. So bali nag-exchange sila og ideas, right? Kasi yung passive is like lang sila, parang absent, na sila dira na presence, dahil presence pero ilang mind is like out of nowhere. Alright, now, so when we say intentional process, okay, now, intentional process, it emphasizes the consciousness of learning. Of course, you as a teacher, you have that conscious foresight, no, of what are you going to do, what you are going to do during the implementation process para mas ma-active ang students. There is an interaction happen. So again, as I said, you have that conscious foresight, no, kung how are you going to meet your goals of learning or the intended learning outcomes. How are you going to meet or to reach that? So in planning phases pa lang, you have that conscious foresight, of course, no. Alright, so next is goals of the learning process. Okay, so what is goal of the learning process? The successful learners over time and with support of instructional guidance can create meaningful and coherent representation of knowledge. So when we say goals of the learning process, it is the statement of what you want to learn, kasi mo gusto ma-learn sa mga bata during sa learning process. So these goals can be set at different levels, including course content level, skill level of the student, and knowledge level of the students. So learning goals, so goals of the learning process, no, it should be, of course, you're going to use the SMART, no, the specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. So here in goals of the learning process, a teacher is you are the facilitator, of course, diba? We as a teacher, we are the implementer of the curriculum. And here in the goals of the learning process, you're going to assess the learners in creating meaningful learning goals. And of course, you're going to facilitate in order to reach that learning goals, the goals, no? with yes. So you as a teacher, you are going to get the attention of that students in order to learn or to in order to yes acquire the goal of that subject matter. Okay, so much for that. Next is construction of knowledge. Now, what is construction of knowledge? So when we say construction of knowledge, the successful learners can link new information with existing knowledge in meaningful ways. Right. So when we say construction of knowledge, the knowledge of construction is a process by which learners actively build their understanding of that specific topic or concept through exploration, reflection, and of course interaction. So it involves constructing meaning from the information and experience gained through the learning activities and the project.
A pleasant day to everyone. I am Farah Katrindi, and I am going to continue the discussion of fourth to the last principle of cognitive and metacognitive factors. Fourth is strategic thinking. The successful learner can create and use a repertoire. So the repertoire here means a bank of, a list of, or a stock of thinking and reasoning strategies to achieve complex learning goals. So most of a successful learner use strategic thinking in their approach to learning, reasoning, problem solving, and concept learning. So they understand and can use a variety of strategies to help them reach learning and performance goals and to apply their knowledge in novel situation. So a student who strategically think is foreseeing the possibilities ahead. That is why they tend to be more bright and fast pacing. They also continue to expand their repertoire of strategies by reflecting on the methods they use to see which will work for them. By receiving guided instruction and feedback, and by observing or interacting with the appropriate models. So the learning outcomes can be enhanced if educators assist learners in developing, applying, and assessing their strategic learning skills. Next is thinking about thinking. Higher order strategies for selecting and monitoring mental operations facilitate creative and critical thinking. So, successful learners can reflect on how they think and learn, set reasonable learning or performance goals, selecting potentially appropriate learning strategies or models, and monitor their progress towards these goals. So, in addition, successful learners know what to do if a problem occurs or if they are not making sufficient or timely progress towards a goal. So, they can also generate alternative methods to reach their goal or reassess the appropriateness and utility of the goal. So, the instructional methods that focus on helping learners develop these higher order strategies can enhance students' learning and personal responsibility for learning. The last principle of cognitive and metacognitive factor is context of learning. Learning is influenced by environmental factors including culture, technology, and instructional practices. So, learning does not occur in a vacuum. So, this phrase means that learning is an interactive rather than an individual process. So, it involves exchanging of ideas, negotiating, and sharing of decision making together. So, teachers play a major interactive role with both the learner and the learning environment. Also, cultural or group influences on students can impact many educational relevant variables such as motivation, orientation toward learning, and ways of thinking. So, for example, for me, way back in my high school days, I am in the first section of our grade that time. We are the special advisory of the teachers, and my classmates are competitive, bright, ug mga arsgada. So parehas pud sa akong mga friends, mga arsgada. And sila perminti ako ang makauban. So I am also influenced with how they work as a student. I am influenced by their drive or eagerness to learn and to top up. So to me, I must be able to to also pass the activities on time, to work double in order para makasabay ko sa ila. The next, technologies and instructional practices must be appropriate for the learner's level of prior knowledge, cognitive abilities, and their learning and thinking strategies. So, we all know that in our time, the technology is a big help for the teachers in their teaching strategies and a big help for the students in their learning approach. But we must also guide the students in their limits in using the technology or browsing online, as they might get informations that could negatively affect their behavior as a person and behavior as a learner. Also, the classroom environment, particularly the degree to which it is nurturing or not, can also have significant impact on student learning. So, the classroom environment is very important for the students, as it helps them focus on their studies and make them feel belonged. Or we must build a classroom that is inclusive, and we must build a students of open mindedness about every individual's differences and every individual's cultural background and personality.
So, good day everyone. I am April Jen Diazes, and now let us proceed to the motivational and effective factors. So, the first one is the motivational and emotional influences on learning. Motivation and emotions are essential influence on our learning process. They determine how much effort and dedication we put into learning and ultimately impact the outcome of our learning. Positive emotions, beliefs, interests, and habits of thinking can enhance our motivation, while negative emotions, fixed mindset, and lack of interest can hinder it. As learners, it is crucial to be aware of our motivational and emotional states and work towards cultivating a positive mindset to maximize our learning potential. The next one is the intrinsic motivation to learn. So this motivation is a powerful force that drives learners to engage in meaningful and purposeful learning experiences. It is stimulated by tasks that are of optimal novelty and difficulty, so relevant to personal interest and provide for personal choice and control. So when learners are intrinsically motivated, they are more likely to be creative, think critically, and be curious about the world around them. So the last one is the effects of motivation on effort. So motivation plays a crucial role in the acquisition of complex knowledge and skills. So it is the driving force that compels learners to put in the required effort, maintain a positive attitude, set and achieve goals, engage in active learning, and overcome obstacles. So with the right motivation, learners can unlock their full potential and achieve success and acquiring complex knowledge and skills.
Developmental and social factors. Developmental influences on learning. As individuals develop, there are opportunities and constraints for learning. Learning is most effective when the differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. So as individuals learn best when materials is appropriate to their developmental level. and is presented in an enjoyable and interesting way because individuals' development varies across intellectual, social, emotional, and physical domains achieves in different instructional domain may also vary. So an example of a scenario that relates to the developmental influence on learning is when a group of students of different ages and developmental stages are assigned a project to work on together. So the older students may have more advanced cognitive abilities and can grasp complex concepts faster, while the younger student may struggle to understand and keep up. So this example highlights how the developmental differences among students can affect their learning experiences and outcomes. The cognitive, emotional, and social development of individual learners and how they interpret life experience are affected by prior schooling, home, cultures, and community factors. So early and continuing parental involvement in schooling and a quality of language interaction and two ways of communication between adults and children can influence these developmental areas. Awareness and understanding of developmental differences among children with and without emotional, physical, or intellectual disabilities can facilitate the creation of optimal learning contexts. The second one is the social influences on learning. So, learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relation, and communication with others. Learning can be enhanced when the learners has an opportunity to interact and to collaborate with others on instructional tasks. So, for example, in classroom, for example, a scenario in a classroom where students are encouraged to work in groups and collaborate on assignments. So, in these scenarios, students have the opportunity to interact with their peers, engage in discussion, share ideas, and learn from each other's perspectives. So this social interaction can enhance the learning experience as students can gain different insight and perspective from their classmates. So the learning setting that allow for social interaction and that respect diversity, encourage flexible thinking and social competence. So interactive and collaborative instructional contexts, individuals have an opportunity to perspective taking and reflective thinking that may lead to a higher level of cognitive, social, and moral development as well as the self-esteem. So quality personal relationship that provide stability, trust, and caring can increase learners' sense of belonging, self-respect, and also self-acceptance and provide a positive climate for learning. Also, family influences positive interpersonal support and instruction in self-motivation strategies can upset factors that interfere with optimal learning, such as negative beliefs about competence in a particular subject, high level of test, anxiety, negative sexual expectations, and undue pressure to perform well. So positive learning climates can also help to establish the context for healthier level of thinking, feeling, and behaving, such as the context help learners feel safe to share ideas, actively participate in the learning process, and create a learning community.
Good day everyone, I am April Shane Fernando and I am assigned to report the individual differences factors. First is individual differences in learning. Learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning that are function of prior experience and heredity. And individuals are born with and develop their own capabilities and talents. In addition, through learning and social acculturation, they have acquired their own preferences for how they like to learn and the pace at which they learn. However, these preferences are not always useful in helping learners reach their learning goals. So, educators need to help students examine their learning preferences and expand or modify them if necessary. The interaction between learner differences and curricular and environmental conditions is another key factors affecting learning outcomes. And also, educators need to be sensitive to individual differences in general. They also need to attend to learner perceptions of the degree to which these differences are accepted and adopted to by varying instructional methods and materials. Next is learning and diversity. Learning is most effective when differences in learners' linguistic, cultural, and social backgrounds are taken into account. The same basic principles of learning, motivation, and effective instruction apply to all learners. However, language, ethnicity, race, beliefs, and socioeconomic status all can influence learning. Careful attention to these factors in the instructional setting enhance the possibilities for designing and implementing appropriate learning environment. When learners perceive that their individual differences and abilities, background, cultures, and experiences are valued, respected, and accommodate in learning tasks and context, level of motivation and achievement are enhanced. And next is standard and assessment. Setting appropriate, high, and challenging standards and assessing the learner as well as learning progress, including diagnostic process and outcome assessment, are integral parts of the learning process. So, assessment provides important information to both the learners and the teachers at all stages of the learning process. And effective learning takes place when learners feel challenged to work towards appropriate high goals. Therefore, appraisal of the learner's cognitive strength and weaknesses as well as current knowledge and skills is important for selection of instructional materials of an optimal degree of difficulty. And ongoing assessment of the learner's understanding of curricular material can provide valuable feedback to both learners and teachers about progress toward the learning goals. And the standardized assessment of learner progress and outcomes assessment provide one type of information about achievement levels both within and across individuals that can inform various type of programmatic decisions. And also performance assessment can provide other sources of information about the attainment of learning outcomes. And also self-assessments of learning progress can also improve students' self-appraisal skills and enhance motivation and self-directed learning.